the most innocent place becomes the setting for our worst nightmare. Marcus Thompson never imagined that a simple visit to a pet shop could awaken the beast within him. At 33, he had learned to control his darkest impulses, keeping the creature dormant through medication, meditation, and a rigorous routine that kept him away from dangerous situations. But on that gray afternoon, as he walked the streets of Portland, Oregon, fate led him to a place that would test the limits of his self-control. The Paws and Whiskers pet shop sat on a busy corner, its colorful windows displaying playful puppies and cute kittens that attracted entire families. Marcus had passed by dozens of times, always averting his gaze and quickening his pace. He knew places like these were traps for his bestial nature. The scent of small, defenseless animals awakened something primal and terrifying within him, something he fought daily to keep buried deep in his fragmented mind. But that afternoon, a sudden storm forced him to seek shelter. The rain fell like icy projectiles, and the wind howled between the buildings with the intensity that made the windows rattle. Marcus ran toward the first open door he found, not understanding what he was entering. Only when the doorbell rang softly behind him did he realize his fatal mistake. The aroma hit him like a punch to the gut, an intoxicating mix of wet fur, kibble, sawdust, and that sweet, innocent scent only small, vulnerable creatures possess. His eyes slowly adjusted to the yellowish light inside the store. Cages stacked on high shelves held hamsters running on their wheels, parakeets singing carefree melodies, and rabbits nibbling on carrots, their ears fluttering delicately. The sound was a symphony of innocent life that made Marcus's heart race dangerously. He could feel the creature inside him stirring, stretching its metaphorical claws and sniffing the air with renewed interest. It was as if a hungry predator had just discovered a buffet of defenseless prey. The owner, a gray-haired woman named Mrs. Henderson, approached with a warm smile on her face. She noticed Marcus's tense expression, interpreting it as discomfort from the rain still pounding the windows. She offered him a dry towel and a cup of hot coffee, gestures of kindness that only intensified the internal conflict unfolding in his mind. Marcus nodded in thanks, trying to keep his voice controlled as he explained that he was simply waiting for the storm to pass. But Mrs. Henderson, misinterpreting his hesitation, began leading him through the aisles of the store, proud to show off all the animals she cared for with such care. Every step Marcus took through the pet shop was a battle with himself. The creature within him whispered dark suggestions, painting violent scenarios that made his hands tremble imperceptibly. He watched the hamsters scurry about in their cages and could almost taste the metallic fear on his tongue. The wolf within purred with satisfaction, savoring every scent, every sound, every movement of the small animals surrounding him. Marcus clenched his fists tightly, his nails digging into his palms until they nearly pierced the skin. Physical pain was his only anchor to sanity at that moment. Mrs. Henderson continued her enthusiastic narrative about each animal, completely oblivious to the drama unfolding in the mind of her unexpected visitor. She told stories of orphaned puppies she had rescued, injured cats she had healed, and happy families who had found their perfect companions there. Her words were like heavenly music, contrasting with the diabolical symphony echoing in Marcus's head. The woman's genuine kindness only increased his guilt and despair, for he knew his presence there posed a threat to everything she had built with love and dedication. The internal conflict intensified with each passing second. Marcus could feel his canines lengthening slightly, his muscles contracting with a supernatural energy that threatened to explode at any moment. The wolf wanted to hunt, wanted to feel the primal pleasure of pursuit and capture. It was a thirst that went beyond physical hunger, It was a deep, disturbing psychological need that defined the curse of his existence. He struggled to keep his breathing controlled, but each inhalation brought new scents that fed the ravenous beast within. The puppy section was where Mrs. Henderson kept her most prized possessions. Tiny golden retrievers played with each other in a large playpen, their high-pitched barks echoing through the store like children's laughter. There was also a corner dedicated to newborn kittens, tiny creatures that meowed weakly as they sought warmth. Marcus felt his legs weaken as he approached this area. The predatory instinct that coursed through his veins like liquid fire reached its peak. He could hear each animal's pounding heartbeat, smell the sweet scent of their innocence, and it awakened something so primal and terrifying that it made his vision blur at the edges. The transformation began subtly, almost imperceptibly. His senses sharpened beyond normal human limits. He could distinguish every individual heartbeat, every tiny breath, every nervous movement of small animals. The world around him gained a preternatural clarity, as if he were seeing through special lenses that revealed previously hidden details. Colors became more vibrant, sounds sharper, and smells transformed into an overwhelming cascade of sensory information that threatened to completely overwhelm his human mind. Marcus tried to focus on human thoughts, remembering his normal life, his job as an accountant in a small, quiet office, his lonely nights watching television in his modest apartment. But these memories seemed fragile and distant compared to the visceral reality surrounding him. The beast within him had no interest in spreadsheets or financial reports. It wanted only one thing, and that thing was there, within his reach, small and vulnerable and completely defenseless against the supernatural fury threatening to explode from within. Mrs. Henderson noticed that Marcus had stopped moving and approached with maternal concern written all over her face. She asked if he was feeling okay, if he needed more coffee, or perhaps a place to sit. Her genuine kindness was like salt in a raw wound for Marcus, who struggled not to reveal the monster stirring violently within his seemingly human skin. He mumbled something about feeling a little dizzy from the storm, but his voice came out huskier than intended, laced with a tension that made Mrs. Henderson frown slightly. The critical moment arrived when one of the golden retriever puppies approached the fence of the playpen, its tiny paws stretching toward Marcus with innocent curiosity. The animal was unafraid, unaware of the danger emanating from the man before it. Its bright, trusting eyes stared directly at Marcus, as if inviting him to play. It was a gesture of pure innocence that unleashed a storm of conflicting emotions in Marcus's heart. Part of him wanted to protect this adorable creature, but a much more primal and powerful part wanted to destroy it. His hands began to tremble violently, and Marcus had to swallow a groan of physical pain that threatened to escape his throat. The transformation was gaining momentum, and he knew he had very little time before he completely lost control. His canines lengthened a few more millimeters, slightly piercing his lower lip and releasing a few drops of blood, which he quickly swallowed. The metallic taste only intensified his predatory instincts, as if it were an appetizer before the main course that awaited him. Marcus's internal struggle intensified when Mrs. Henderson opened the playpen door and scooped up the curious puppy. She offered him to Marcus to hold, commenting on how special the little golden retriever was, how he had been abandoned at a young age and needed extra care. The animal squirmed gently in Mrs. Henderson's arms, its bright little eyes fixed on Marcus's face as if it could sense something different about him, but couldn't quite grasp what it was. The creature's absolute innocence was both a blessing and a curse for the man struggling with his own bestial nature. Marcus instinctively recoiled, his hands curling into tight fists to hide his nails, which had become slightly longer and sharper. He mumbled an excuse about being allergic to animal fur, but his voice was strangled and filled with a tension that made the puppy stir in Mrs. Henderson's arms. Animals always knew. They possessed a sixth sense that allowed them to detect predators, even when those predators wore human skin as a disguise. The small golden retriever began to whimper softly, his primal instincts alerting him to the danger he couldn't fully comprehend. The shop owner interpreted the animal's agitation as simple nervousness and tried to soothe it with gentle caresses. She didn't realize she was holding potential prey in front of a hungry predator, creating a situation that tested the limits of Marcus's self-control. He could feel every beat of the puppy's tiny heart, hear the sound of its rapid breathing, and smell the sweet scent of its soft, vulnerable skin. It was an exquisite torture that made his muscles contract with a supernatural energy that threatened to explode into uncontrollable violence. Marcus's inner wolf growled with sadistic satisfaction, savoring every second of this dangerous proximity. The beast whispered promises of primal pleasure, painting detailed scenarios of hunting and capture that made Marcus's mouth water. He could imagine the sensation of fangs piercing soft skin, the hot, metallic taste that would follow, the deep, disturbing satisfaction of finally giving in to the instincts he had fought to suppress for years. It was a fantasy so vivid and tantalizing that it made his legs wobble, and he had to discreetly lean against a nearby shelf to keep from falling. Mrs. Henderson finally noticed the alarming state of her unexpected visitor. She carefully placed the puppy back in its playpen and approached Marcus with genuine concern etched on her wrinkled face. She asked if he needed medical help, if she should call someone, if there was anything she could do to help him. Her maternal kindness only intensified the crushing guilt Marcus felt, for he knew his presence there posed a mortal threat to everything she loved and protected. He was a wolf in sheep's clothing, infiltrating the sanctuary of innocence. The storm outside seemed to reflect the internal chaos consuming Marcus. Lightning flashed across the shop windows at irregular intervals, creating dancing shadows that seemed to take on a life of their own. The wind howled between the buildings with an intensity that made the glass vibrate, as if nature itself were reacting to the presence of the supernatural predator lurking among its most vulnerable creatures. Marcus squeezed his eyes shut, trying to focus on anything other than the sounds, smells, and sights that fed the ravenous beast within him. The turning point came when Mrs. Henderson led Marcus to the exotic animal section, where she kept some of the rarer creatures she had rescued over the years. There was a terrarium with small lizards that moved with mesmerizing agility, cages with tropical birds whose vibrant colors seemed to pulse under the artificial light, and even a few playful ferrets that writhed around each other in a perpetual dance of youthful energy. Every movement, every sound, every smell was like another note in the predatory symphony that echoed in Marcus's mind, pushing him ever closer to the limit beyond which there would be no return. The physical transformation began to manifest itself more clearly. His eyes, normally a dull brown, began to glow with an unearthly golden light that pulsed in sync with his racing heart. His nostrils flared involuntarily, capturing every aromatic nuance of the environment with a precision far beyond normal human capabilities. Marcus could distinguish not only the general scent of animals, but also detect the emotional state of each individual creature, the subtle fear of small birds, the innocent curiosity of ferrets, the nervous anxiety of lizards that seemed to sense his predatory presence. Mrs. Henderson continued her enthusiastic narrative, telling the story of each rescued animal with the love of a mother speaking of her children. She didn't realize that her words were like stabs to Marcus's conflicted heart, constantly reminding him of the purity and innocence his bestial nature threatened to destroy. Each story of rescue and care was a painful reminder that he represented everything this kind woman dedicated her life to fighting against: danger, violence, the destruction of innocence. Marcus's control began to crumble when one of the ferrets escaped from its cage through a small opening Mrs. Henderson hadn't noticed. The small, agile creature scampered across the shop floor with erratic movements, its bright eyes reflecting curiosity and joy at its momentary freedom. It was exactly the kind of moving prey that awakened the most primal hunting instincts of Marcus's inner wolf. His muscles contracted involuntarily, preparing for the leap, and he had to dig his nails into his palms hard enough to pierce the skin and release a few drops of blood. Mrs. Henderson laughed at the ferret's antics and bent down to try to capture it, completely unaware of the supernatural drama unfolding just a few feet away. Marcus watched the scene with an intensity that made his pupils dilate dangerously. He could calculate the tiny creature's exact trajectory, could predict every move, could sense the perfect moment for the attack. The beast within him growled in anticipation, preparing to finally unleash all the predatory fury that had been pent up during years of torturous self-control. Marcus's breathing became heavier and more irregular, creating small clouds of steam in the slightly chilly air of the shop. His hands trembled uncontrollably, and he could feel the bones in his face beginning to subtly adjust, preparing for the complete transformation that threatened to explode at any moment. The sound of his own heartbeat echoed in his ears like war drums, partially drowning out the sounds of the surrounding animals and creating an ominous soundtrack for what promised to be a tragedy of unimaginable proportions. The escaped ferret ran straight toward Marcus's feet, as if fate were orchestrating the most dangerous encounter possible. The small creature stopped right next to his shoes, rose on its hind legs, and stared at him with innocent curiosity, completely unaware that it was putting itself in the firing line of a hungry, supernatural predator. Marcus looked down and saw those bright, trusting eyes fixed on his face, and something inside him shattered irrevocably. The wolf within roared in triumph, knowing it would finally get its long-denied meal. The transformation accelerated dramatically at that critical moment. Marcus's canines elongated into fangs, piercing his lower lip and releasing a steady trickle of blood that ran down his chin. His muscles visibly expanded beneath his shirt, tearing the fabric in places where the pressure became unbearable. His skin began to develop patches of thick, dark hair, especially around his neck and arms. But most disturbing was the expression in his eyes, still human in form, but filled with a primal hunger, unbelonging to any civilized creature. Mrs. Henderson finally realized something was terribly wrong. She turned to Marcus and saw a man who was no longer fully human, but also not entirely animal. He was something caught in limbo between two worlds, an abomination that defied every natural law she knew. Her eyes widened in terror as she took in the bloodied fangs, the abnormally developed muscles, and especially the predatory expression that transformed a once ordinary face into something out of her worst nightmares. A scream of pure horror built in her throat, but it came out only as a strangled whisper of utter terror. Marcus struggled to maintain some semblance of humanity as he watched terror spread across the face of the kind woman who had tried to help him. Part of him wanted to apologize, to explain that it wasn't his fault, that he had tried to resist, that he had never wanted to become the monster that now occupied his skin. But those words never reached his lips, for the beast had taken almost complete control of his vocal cords. What emerged from his mouth was a low, menacing growl that sent every animal in the store into simultaneous panic. The chaos that ensued was indescribable. Birds beat their wings frantically against the bars of their cages. Hamsters ran in hysterical circles. Cats meowed in primal terror, and dogs barked with an urgency that seemed to alert the entire world to the presence of the predator in their midst. Mrs. Henderson stumbled backward, trying to reach the phone behind the counter, but her abrupt movements only intensified Marcus's hunting instincts. To the wolf within him, she had instantly transformed from protector to fleeing prey, and this triggered a predatory response that was impossible to control. Marcus took a step toward the terrified woman, his nails, now real claws, scraping the linoleum floor of the shop. Each movement was fluid and predatory, as if he were following a script genetically programmed into his bones from millions of years of evolution. The ferret at his feet fled in terror, but Marcus barely noticed it now that he had identified larger, more challenging prey. Its golden eyes fixed on Mrs. Henderson with a burning intensity, and he could feel saliva pooling in his mouth as the beast savored anticipation of what was to come. The storm outside reached its climax just as Marcus completed his partial transformation. A bolt of lightning illuminated the entire store with a blinding white light, revealing in horrifying detail the creature he had become, still recognizably human, but distorted by wolfish features that defied all natural logic. His orange shirt hung in tatters from his muscular torso, and his hands had become grotesque hybrids of human fingers and razor-sharp clawed paws. His dark hair, once neatly combed back, was now disheveled and growing in thick strands that intermingled with the hair sprouting from his skin. Mrs. Henderson finally managed a scream, a high-pitched sound of pure terror that echoed through the store and made Marcus hesitate for a crucial moment. The human part of his mind, still struggling desperately to maintain some control, registered the absolute pain and fear in the voice of this kind woman who did not deserve to fall victim to his curse. It was a moment of mental clarity amidst the chaos of predatory instincts, a tiny window of opportunity to maybe, just maybe, resist the inevitable. Marcus pressed his claws against his temples, trying to use the physical pain to anchor him to human reality for a few more precious seconds. The internal conflict reached epic proportions in those moments suspended in time. On one side, the beast snarled and demanded satisfaction after years of forced denial. On the other, the last vestiges of Marcus Thompson, accountant, law-abiding citizen, a man who had dedicated his entire adult life to protecting the world from its monstrous nature, begged for a final chance to do the right thing. The outcome of this battle would determine not only Mrs. Henderson's fate, but also forever define who Marcus truly was at the deepest core of his tortured being. The animals in the store seemed to sense the supernatural tension that filled the air. Their screams, barks, and chirps combined into a cacophony of primal terror that served as a soundtrack to the unfolding drama. Some of the smaller animals fainted from sheer terror, their tiny bodies curling up at the bottom of their cages as if trying to hide from the predatory presence that threatened to destroy their safe and secure world. It was as if all of nature recognized that something fundamentally wrong was happening in this place of care and compassion. Marcus closed his eyes tightly, trying to find some anchor amidst the hurricane of bestial instincts that threatened to sweep him away forever. He thought of all the innocent people he had known throughout his life, all the moments of human kindness he had witnessed, all the reasons why the monster inside him was worth fighting. Mrs. Henderson represented everything good in the world: compassion, care, unconditional love for the most vulnerable creatures. To destroy her would be to destroy a part of humanity's very hope. When Marcus opened his eyes again, they still glowed with unearthly golden fire, but there was something different about them now. a steely determination not present before, a resolve that came from a place deeper than bestial instincts. He looked at Mrs. Henderson, who was cornered against the counter, her eyes wide with terror, and then slowly turned toward the shop door. Each step was an epic battle against his own nature, each movement costing him a willpower he hadn't known he possessed. The beast within him growled with frustration and rage, but Marcus kept walking, pushing aside the temptation that had nearly destroyed him. The door closed behind him with a soft bell, leaving Mrs. Henderson alone with her terrified animals and a memory she would carry for the rest of her life. Marcus disappeared into the storm, fighting the transformation that still pulsed through his veins, knowing he had won a battle but that the war within him would never end. Where he went and what happened next remains a dark mystery on the wet streets of Portland, where sometimes on stormy nights animals still cry for no apparent reason, as if remembering the day the beast nearly defeated the man.